It all started with a phone call I never expected to get one from a neighbor saying there were men in camo with rifles walking through my north pasture. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone took a wrong turn off the main road. But when I drove out there, what I saw had my stomach drop for hunters in orange vests, casually setting up near my heritage bull enclosure like they had every right to be there. I slammed on the brakes, jumped out, and before I could even say a word, one of them waved and said, "The HOA lady said we had permission." My heart sank. See, I own a private ranch passed down through 3 generations. My bulls aren't just livestock, they're part of a protected heritage breed, listed under conservation due to their rare bloodline. These animals are registered and monitored. You can't just walk in and start hunting near them, but apparently someone thought my land was fair game. That someone, none other than our self-declared HOA president, Karen, who's not even legally part of my land's jurisdiction. Karen's always had a thing about bringing order to the neighborhood, even though we live miles apart and she's technically got no say over what happens on ranch land. But this time, she crossed a line that could have ruined decades of breeding work. I don't know what she told those hunters or how she convinced them they had legal access. But what I do know is that if one of those bulls had been harmed, the fines and the fallout would have been enormous. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I found something behind my barn that changed everything. What I found might explain why Karen wanted people back there in the first place, but I'll get to that in a second. So after I got the hunters off my land, which wasn't easy, by the way, they packed up, still claiming they had permission. One of them even pulled out a printed map with handwritten notes and a signature at the bottom. It wasn't mine, but I recognized the handwriting. Karen had drawn up a fake access pass and labeled parts of my ranch as community hunting grounds. That alone had me boiling, but I kept my focus. I needed to check on the bulls first. As I walked the fence line, I noticed one of the gates had been unlocked and swung halfway open. My heart was racing. If any of those bulls had wandered out while those guys were loading up, it could have been a disaster. Thankfully, they were all there, clustered near the watering trough, but clearly spooked. These animals aren't just rare, they're sensitive. You don't just bring strangers with weapons near them and expect everything to stay calm. I've spent years working with conservation groups, doing DNA registrations, and reporting health stats for this bloodline. This isn't just a hobby ranch. It's a living, breathing heritage project. After I calmed the bulls and double-checked the locks, I walked toward the barn mainly just to get away and gather my thoughts. That's when I saw it. Something had been moved. There were fresh tire tracks behind the barn leading to a patch of overgrown brush I hadn't touched in months. And tucked just behind a fallen log, I spotted a buried plastic container with its lid slightly cracked open. Inside wasn't just trash or tools. It looked like old paperwork, photos, and a few strange items I couldn't make sense of right away. And that's when it hit. Karen hadn't just sent hunters onto my land for sport. Something else was going on. Something she clearly didn't want me finding. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something about that container didn't sit right. The papers were yellowed and folded in strange ways, like someone had tried to hide them in a rush. I pulled out what looked like an old property survey one that didn't match my current records. In this version, the boundary lines were redrawn, slicing right through the middle of my pasture and looping a chunk of my land into what was marked as undeveloped community acreage. That made my stomach turn. Was Karen trying to make a legal case that part of my ranch didn't even belong to me? I'd heard whispers before. A few neighbors mentioned that Karen had been talking to the county office about repurposing unused land in our area for community use. I always thought she meant the old service road or the empty lot behind her place. But this was a whole new level. And it explained why she'd been so eager to paint my ranch as unregulated or open territory. If she could convince people, That my land wasn't really mine, or worse, that it was neglected, then maybe she thought she could push her fake HOA rules into something enforceable. I started digging deeper into the box. One manila folder had copies of old complaint letters, anonymous ones about unsecured livestock, noise disturbances, and even possible zoning violations. All baseless. But they were dated months apart, like someone had been building a file slowly and deliberately. And the strangest part, there were pictures. Grainy, zoomed-in photos of me walking the fence line, my bulls grazing, even a shot of my barn door wide open. Who was taking these? Was Karen acting alone? Or was someone else helping her? That's when I remembered the drone. A few weeks back, I heard a buzzing near the windmill, just before sundown. I brushed it off, but now I wasn't so sure. The more I pieced it together, the more it felt like this wasn't just some HOA nonsense gone too far. This was personal. That drone I brushed off weeks ago. Now it seemed like someone had been scouting my land, watching my routines, tracking where the bulls roamed, where I parked my truck, even where I stored feed and supplies. I went back through my trail cam footage, and sure enough, 2 clips showed a small drone hovering low over the tree line just beyond the east fence. Karen's house isn't even visible from that side. That meant someone else had been involved, someone who knew how to work quietly behind the scenes. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up going through the photos again, reading every document from the container. It was a paper trail of manipulation. And all of it pointed toward one thinker had been laying the groundwork to challenge my land ownership. But why now? Why after all these years? That's when I remembered something a neighbor told me. Last month, there was talk about a new development. It's a project in the Worksa Wildlife Corridor that was supposed to run straight through our area. A government-funded one. And there'd be money involved. A lot of it if Karen could somehow make it look like I wasn't maintaining my land, or that part of it was unclaimed or disputed. Maybe she thought she could push it into that deal and take credit. That explained the fake hunting permits, the drones, even the tampered survey lines. She wanted to make it look like my ranch was just open, unmanaged land for reclaiming. But what she didn't count on was that I'd find the box. And she definitely didn't expect what I'd uncover next. Because while digging near the barn the next morning, I found something buried that changed everything. And made this personal on a whole new level. I went back out early the next morning, same spot behind the barn where the container had been stashed. Something kept nagging at me about the tire tracks. They were fresh, yeah, but they weren't the kind of tread you'd expect from a car or truck. They were narrower, smoother. I followed them farther out toward the overgrown section near the creek bed where I hadn't cleared brush in years. That's when I saw the corner of a tarp sticking out from under a rotted wood pallet, barely visible beneath leaves and debris. I pulled it back and froze. Underneath wasn't just more paperwork, was equipment, surveying tools, a drone case, a wildlife motion camera, and a clipboard with a government seal stamped at the top of the form. Except it wasn't official at least not anymore. The date on the form was from 3 years ago, and the name listed under the independent consultant section. Karen's cousin. A name I recognized because he had briefly worked for a land management agency that was shut down for misreporting conservation data. And suddenly, it all clicked. Karen hadn't just been trying to take credit for some new development, she was trying to stage one, fake reports, planted cameras, altered maps. If she could make it look like my land had been abandoned, misused, or improperly zoned, she could push for it to be reclassified. That would open the door to state buyout offers. And if she could slide her cousin in as the project's restoration expert, they could both walk away with a payout while painting it all as a win for the community. But here's the thing, she must have realized I was getting too close. Because later that afternoon, while I was loading hay, I noticed my cattle gate 1 I had padlocked the night before was wide open. Not just unlocked. Cut, and 3 of my heritage bulls were missing. I didn't wait. I dropped everything and jumped in the truck, flying down the back trail toward the creek beds where the bulls usually wandered when they got loose. My heart was pounding not just from worry about the animals, but from what it all pointed to. If someone had intentionally let them out or worse hurt them, this wasn't just land theft. This was sabotage. I finally spotted one of the bulls near the tree line, pacing nervously. Then I heard a faint moo from deeper in the brush. I pushed through on foot and found the other, too spooked but unharmed. Thank God. I rounded them up slowly, using feed and calm tones to guide them back toward the corral. But something caught my eye in the grass nearby. It was a pair of bolt cutters, new, still clean. Someone had been here very recently. They'd cut the lock, scattered the bulls, and left in a hurry. By the time I got the bulls secured, I already had the sheriff on the line. I handed over the fake permits, the drone footage, and even the altered survey maps. The deputy didn't hesitate. They launched an investigation the same day. Turns out Karen's cousin had been using outdated credentials to present himself as a consultant to local officials, quietly pushing a proposal for land acquisition, my land. Within a week, the sheriff's department confirmed what I'd suspected. Karen had used neighborhood complaints, falsified property lines, and even those hunting tours to build a narrative that my ranch was being misused and neglected. But it all unraveled fast once they found the equipment stash and traced the camera metadated back to her cousin's office. Here's the twist: while Karen was being questioned, it came out that someone else in the HOA had tipped her off about the state buyout plans months before they were even public. Someone with access to internal emails at the county. This whole time, Karen wasn't acting alone. And the real puppet master? They still haven't named them. Not yet. In the weeks that followed, everything slowly came into focus. The county launched a full audit into the proposed wildlife corridor project, and with enough pressure from my attorney and the local ag board, the whole scheme got shut down. Karen's cousin was officially disqualified from any state contracts. And Karen herself was hit with a civil suit for trespassing, property damage, and fraud. She's since disappeared from the HOA board, entirely resigned quietly before they could vote to remove her. No apology, no explanation, just gone. As for the mystery person inside the county office, the sheriff's team never gave a name publicly. But word got around that a planning assistant was quietly let go for misconduct. I didn't push for more. I figured it was enough that they wouldn't be messing with anyone else's land. But I did make one thing clear. My ranch isn't just property, it's living history. Those bulls are part of a protected heritage breed for a reason. And I'm going to keep fighting to make sure they're respected and preserved. Looking back, I think the biggest lesson was realizing how quickly people will twist the truth when there's money involved. All the fake maps, the fake complaints, even bringing hunters onto my land, it was all about spinning a story. But facts matter, paper trails matter, and knowing your rights, that matters most of all. The good news: the herd's safe, the land is protected, and I've added more security cameras plus a few new locks. Karen won't be cutting through anytime soon. If there's one thing I'd say to anyone out there with land, livestock, or even just a stubborn neighbor, trust your gut, document everything, and don't back down when something feels off. Because sometimes the quietest battles are the ones that matter most.